Well, it looks like a lot's been going on since an appeals court threw out the FAA's drone registration law.
Briefing. Excellent.
Casy Neistat and Mr. Steele. Gee, a lot's been going on since an appeals court struck down the FAA's law requiring recreational drone pilots to register with the FAA. Now, I think in both of these cases, I think this was going on probably before this Supreme Court had made that decision. However, I think the FAA had a pretty good idea that this was going to happen. So Mr. Steele was charged with trespassing and also interviewed by the FAA in regards to his flight of his drone, or quadcopter, or racing quad. And I'm just going to, from now on, refer to it as a racing quad. Then you have Casy Neistat, which in his latest video right now, the one where he's talking about the DJI Spark that they sent him, the pre-production model, he says in that he can't fly in New York anymore because he's under investigation by the FAA. Which, I'll be honest with you, I'm surprised it hasn't happened sooner, because Casey, flagrant disregard for safety regulations and, just common sense when flying a drone. I mean, people have been talking about Casey for a while, a lot of aggravation from the, multi-rotor community, so to speak, because it doesn't paint well onto the rest of the people who just want to fly their multi-rotors without being looked at like you're breaking a law. So yeah, Casey has been flying just wherever and whenever and however he wants. Now, there is some debate over whether or not he has Part 107. There's some debate whether or not, what he's doing is legal or not. And here's the thing. I've had some people say to me over the internet that they have actual rock solid evidence or proof, or whatever you want to call it, that Casey does not have Part 107, but that doesn't really matter. You technically don't need Part 107 to use your multi-rotor to make money. Here's the thing. If you know somebody who's Part 107 or has a pilot's license, all you have to do is have them with you. And there's really no way for us to know whether or not Casey has his Part 107 or has had somebody with Part 107 or pilot's license with him when doing these flights. The problem is, if he had his Part 107 or had somebody with him with their Part 107, well, that kind of puts him even at more risk for getting the book thrown at him. Well, what do I mean by that? For recreation, there are no laws concerning the flight of a multi-rotor or any other kind of RC flight, where, how, and what you can fly them. And I know what you're thinking right now. No, you can't fly higher than 100 feet. You can't fly over people. If you're 5 miles from an airport, you have to call the tower. Bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, blah, 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 yakety-schmackety. Listen, those are guidelines. Those are not laws. There are no laws that you can break regarding those guidelines. If you don't follow those guidelines, you won't get charged with anything that has to do with flying a drone, bottom line, or a multi-rotor, or an airplane, whatever you want to call it. What you will get is, if you actually broke a law, they'll throw that book at you. And what do I mean? So, like, let's say I decide, there's really no laws that say I can't fly within 5 miles of an airport without calling the tower. So let's go do that. Now, if I go 3 miles from an airport and fly my racing quad, which, let's be honest, I'm not going to fly higher than probably 100 feet with it, if that. But, and I'm not going to cause an issue to an airline or air traffic. That's probably a given. But let's say I do that and everything's fine and I don't bother air traffic and I walk away and I leave. Am I going to get arrested? for flying my drone without calling tower? No. But if I cause an interruption to air traffic or cause an unsafe situation directly with air traffic, well, I'm going to get arrested for reckless endangerment, amongst other things. And none of that is going to have any wording of RC flight. It's just going to say that I willfully endangered the lives of passengers on an airplane or something like that. In the case of Casey Neistat, if he's not Part 107 and hasn't had somebody who's Part 107 or a licensed pilot with him, he's not going to get arrested or fined anything to do with how he flew. But he may get reckless endangerment. He may get, trespassing if he trespassed. He may get, who knows, if they watch his videos and say, well, right there he broke an ordinance or a law trying to fly his drone, not necessarily how he flew his drone. I happen to think that Casey Neistat either has his Part 107 or has a licensed pilot or somebody with Part 107 with him. Because I think that being under investigation by the FAA has no jurisdiction on recreational flight unless he, he did fly near airports, so maybe, I don't know. But otherwise, they don't have jurisdiction. The police will just, they'll go through the police and the police will file whatever they think, whatever kind of charges they think for what laws he broke. But because he's under investigation by the FAA, I think there's some kind of Part 107 or licensed pilot somewhere in this, whether he has 107 or somebody else has 107, because now they're not just looking at what laws did he break to throw the book at him. They're investigating how he flew it, which puts him in a very precarious position because you're held to a higher standard when you have Part 107. So when you do something wrong, well, now you're breaking laws and you're licensed, and you can potentially get in a lot of trouble and get fined lots of money. So I happen to think there's somewhere in there is 107 or a licensed pilot, maybe not necessarily him. Otherwise, I think the FAA would just hand it to the local PD and let them fine him. Now, in the case of Mr. Steele, he was charged with trespassing. He wasn't charged with flying his drone. He wasn't charged with flying his drone recklessly. He wasn't charged with flying his drone dangerously. He wasn't charged with flying his drone where he shouldn't be. He wasn't charged with flying his drone in an area that was off limits. He was arrested for trespassing, felony misdemeanor. Okay, basically, nothing in that charge has anything to do with drones. If he didn't have his drone there and he got caught, he'd still get the same charge, whether he was flying or not. But really, if he hadn't been flying there, he would never be where he is because somebody watched the video and reported him. And which also leads me to one more thing. I really do believe that there is a person or persons or group of people that is just like on a vendetta, and they're going after people who have these videos on YouTube and do fly their drones. It's somebody who's angry and disgruntled, and Mr. Steele had said, somebody might have a problem with me because they don't like me for some reason, and I think this is probably a group of people who just have a problem with drones in general. It could very well be a group of people who are just out to get anybody they can just to make a point. The guidelines are there for a reason. They're to keep us all safe, and they're actually there to make sure we can still do this tomorrow. That's the bottom line. If you want to sit back and go, oh, this is stupid, why do I have to, stay under 400 feet, blah, blah, blah. Following those guidelines will make sure we can do this tomorrow. So follow the guidelines. If we follow these guidelines, then no person or persons with any kind of bug up their ass is going to be able to call the FAA and go, ooh, this guy's not doing what he's supposed to. Watching my video, liking it, and subscribing certainly helps me out a lot in a way of being able to do this more. So I do appreciate it. If you haven't, please subscribe, and please click that thumbs up at the bottom right hand of the video. And hey, happy flying.